When I was 20, I was once asked, where do you see yourself in 10 years? My answer at the time was that I'd probably be married with a big house and a few kids, and I'd be holding a corporate leadership position, making at least $150,000 a year. A perfect life. Or so I thought. I'm now a few years past that point, and none of those things are true. And yet, I still feel like my life has unfolded exactly the way it was meant to. It's pretty funny to think back on how I thought life was going to turn out, and how different it actually ended up being. Chalk a lot of it up to being young and naive, or not knowing how the world worked. When I was 20, I assumed that each year would always build upon the one before it. Each year would always be better than the one before it. And I mean, that made sense. Up until that point, I had only ever been in school. I had been progressing through each grade, and then through each year of my degree. I was learning new things and moving towards the goal of graduation. Everything seemed like it was designed to move forward and upward. But the rest of life is not always designed like that. It has many different trajectories. Looking back now at different periods in my life, I think a lot of how I see and view my own future is shaped by my current personal and professional circumstances. Those circumstances which create the trajectory that I'm currently on. For example, when I was 20, I was going through university with my high school sweetheart. I was in a well-regarded business school with a bunch of high achievers. Everything was going well. I thought I was heading towards that perfect life. Success in the future seemed highly likely, almost guaranteed. So why wouldn't I have thought things would stay that way? Of course I'd be married, with kids, a big house, and a great job in 10 years. Fast forward 2 years to when I was 22. My high school sweetheart and I were no longer together. Experiencing that first heartbreak had been extremely tough. It had shattered my illusion of that perfect life, and things went downhill fast for me in the months following that. But I didn't let it take over my whole life. I refocused my energy on what was in front of me, and I decided to have a year where I said yes to everything. I did so many things that year. I turned the worst year of my life into the best year of my life. I realigned myself back onto an upward trajectory. If you asked me at that point where I saw myself in 10 years, I no longer expected to be married with kids. But I was on the up and up, having rediscovered my own identity. The future still looked bright. Fast forward another 2 years to when I was 24. I was doing well in my first full-time job, which was at a fast-growing tech company that seemed to be shooting for the moon. If you asked me at that point where I saw myself in 10 years, I would have been even more confident in where my career was going. And why wouldn't I be? It had gotten off to a really hot start. I'd completed a few fantastic co-op work terms, and had even won an award for being an outstanding co-op student. And now I found myself in a role in a company that seemed to have endless potential and opportunities for growth. My life had continued on its sharp upward trajectory from the 2 years before. I was pretty sure this was what living in the fast lane was like. So why wouldn't I have thought things would stay that way? Fast forward a few more years to when I was 26, and things were different. I was no longer working at that tech company. The situation there had changed suddenly and harshly. The right decision for me had been to leave, not to stay. Now I was working somewhere else, and it was just okay. The people were great, and there wasn't anything inherently bad about it. But I just felt like I wasn't able to be my best there. I wasn't able to show what I was fully capable of. I wasn't able to live up to my full potential, the way I had been doing before. At first, I tried to, but the environment there wasn't really suited for it. It didn't encourage it. Eventually, I just settled into a state where I was doing only what I needed to do. And I was doing my job well. I wasn't underperforming or doing poorly, but I felt like I wasn't learning anything new. And I knew I was capable of doing so much more. Maybe you found yourself here as well. If you have, you'll know that it's hard. It's almost harder than being at a place that's obviously bad for you. Those types of places are easier to leave. It's much harder to leave a situation that isn't really bad, but also isn't giving you what you fully deserve. And if you asked me at this point where I saw myself in 10 years, I would have said, I don't know. I felt a lot more unsure of myself and unsure of where I was going. Like before, my answer would have been shaped by my current circumstances. And this time, my life was not on an upward trajectory. I felt like my career had stalled, or at least slowed significantly. I was going through some tough issues in my personal life. I felt like everything had plateaued. I wasn't living in the fast lane anymore. I was stuck in the slow lane behind a bunch of other cars. And I didn't really know where I was going or if I was even still on the right path. So why wouldn't I think things would stay this way? It was hard not to feel like this was my life now, and this is what the rest of my life would look like as well. I've learned that life will not always place you on an upward trajectory. Sometimes it'll put you in environments where you feel like you've plateaued. Sometimes it'll seem like you're blocked by a ceiling. Sometimes it'll take away things that you thought were guaranteed in your life. and this will send you on a downward trajectory. Sometimes you might go downward quickly. It's much easier to slip downward than it is to climb upward. You may even hit rock bottom. You may be there for a while. But what I've also learned is that you do not need to stay on your current trajectory forever. You can make changes. These changes can be big or small, minor or drastic, but these changes can, and most often will, change the trajectory of your life. When I found myself feeling stuck in my career and my life, I made what I thought was a small change at the time. I signed up to be a volunteer with a non-profit humanitarian organization. I wasn't feeling fulfilled at work, and I thought doing this would bring that fulfillment in other ways. And it certainly did. I ended up doing a lot of fulfilling volunteer work, but it also ended up being something that completely changed the course of my life. I met someone through that, started a relationship, and moved across the country to a new city, Ottawa. A whole new chapter of my life was unfolding, all stemming from one change I had made because I wasn't happy with the trajectory of my life. And my life during the 4 years I lived in Ottawa was filled with trajectory changes as well. My career went down and flat and up, and almost went in a new direction completely. The relationship that had brought me there eventually came to a close, with lots of ups and downs leading up to that point. And while I had built a wonderful life in a city that I now consider a second home, I eventually made another choice that would again change the trajectory of my life, this time bringing me back to Vancouver. And now, I find the current stage of my life to be on an upward trajectory once more. I am happy with my personal and my professional life. I've started a few journeys for myself recently. I feel like I'm either exactly where I want to be or where I want to be going in life. This life, which has turned out so differently than 20-year-old me thought it would have. And looking back on it, I'm really glad I didn't live out that fully upward trajectory life that I had originally pictured. That might have meant that I would have never faced adversity or had to overcome significant challenges. I wouldn't have gone through all the hard times or hard situations that made me who I am today. I wouldn't have gotten to experience living in a new city or making a new group of best friends. My life would have looked totally different. I would have been a totally different person. Or actually, let me rephrase that. I would have been the same person who would have lived a totally different life. I'm also extremely fortunate to have lived the life that I have. One that has been generally free of all the hardships that different people around the world face on a daily basis. With all that said, I've come to accept and embrace that life will not always have an upward trajectory. Things are good right now, but I know they won't stay this way forever. And the same thing goes for when things aren't good. They won't stay that way forever. Life circumstances can change quickly, and most of the time they'll be completely out of your control. I know I will eventually find myself on a different trajectory in the future, but I also know that I don't have to stay on that path forever. I can make changes, big or small, to change the course of my life's trajectory. And the most important thing is, regardless of whether you're on a downward, flat, or upward trajectory, you're continuing to move forward. So where do I see myself in 10 years? Honestly, I've stopped trying to guess or assume where I will be. The last 10 years have been so unpredictable. If I've tried to look even just a few years ahead, I've always been wrong. I haven't really stayed on the same trajectory for more than 2 years. When I was 24, I thought things at 26 would look much different than how they actually turned out. Same for ages 26 to 28, 28 to 30, and 30 to 32. I don't know what life has in store for me. I don't know what life circumstances are going to happen to me, but I do know that I'm not limited to the trajectory life places me on. So my answer to this now is that I have absolutely no clue where I see myself in 10 years, but I trust that I will have made the best decisions for myself as I've continued to progress through the changing circumstances of life. I will have made changes when and where I needed to have made changes, and whatever trajectory I'm on won't stay that way forever. Anyway, that's it for today. If you found this insightful, your thumbs up is appreciated. I'd also love to hear what you think of your own life's trajectory, if you wish to share. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos on personal development and self-improvement. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.